Nigeria just did something that could quietly reshape Africa. At the same time, European allies just told the United States no. And in East Africa, 8 presidents made a decision that could create millions of jobs almost overnight. Now, none of these stories look connected, but they are. And if you miss what's really happening here, you will miss where power is moving next. Now, here is a number. Hold on to it. $10 billion every year. That's what Nigeria was spending importing fuel. Okay, let me start with that $10 billion number because I need you to really feel it. Nigeria sits on some of the richest oil deposits on the planet. They have been pumping crude for over 60 years, and for most of that 60 years, when a Nigerian pulled up to a petrol station, the fuel in that pump had been on a round trip out of Nigerian ground onto a tanker to a European refinery, refined, loaded back to another tanker, shipped back to Nigeria, sold to Nigerians. Every single time, $10 billion going out the door. So in March 2026, Nigeria's regulator, they are called the NMDPRA, basically said, we are done. No more new import licenses. Dangote Refinery is supplying this country now. Shell, Total Energies, the foreign trading houses, you can sit down. And the data actually backed them up. In February 2026, the Dangote Refinery supplied 92% of Nigeria's fuel. 92. Imports were 3 million liters per day. Dangote Refinery was doing 36.5 million liters per day. It wasn't even close. Now, I can see some of you already celebrating, nodding. And I get it, genuinely an African company shutting out Shell. That's a headline. But I need to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly, because here is the history lesson they skipped in school. Back in the 80s and the 90s, the World Bank and the IMF came to African governments with a deal. You've got debt. We'll help you manage it, but you need to privatize your state assets. Sell the refineries, sell the utilities, let the market work. And African governments, many of them broke, many of them under real pressure. They did it. The problem? There were almost no African billionaires at that scale to buy the companies that were being privatized. You understand how everything was calculated? No African companies with the capital to buy those assets. So, who bought them? European firms, American corporations, at prices that were honestly embarrassing. They walked in with sense and walked out owning the infrastructure of entire economies. Now, compare that to Saudi Arabia. They built Saudi Aramco, state-owned, not for sale. Every single dollar from Saudi Arabia stays inside Saudi Arabia. That's how you build actual power for most African oil producers. On a net basis, after the foreign companies run their cost, their tax optimizations, their accounting. So you discover oil, you throw a party, and quietly you are getting 1 naira out of every 10 naira. And that's why what Dangote has done actually matters. He put up $20 billion of his own money, well, his company's money, and built the largest single-train refinery in the world in Lagos. Not Rotterdam, not Texas, Lagos. And for the first time, there is an African company big enough to do what Shell and BP have been doing on this continent for 100 years. When Angola needed deep water exploration done in the 2000s, they called BP. And that's because no African company could do it. BP did the work, Angola got the fraction. So Dangote is trying to make sure the next generation doesn't have to make that call. But, and I really need you to stay with me here, the story has a twist. By late March, 3 weeks after the ban imports, the government quietly started issuing import licenses again because the US launched a war on Iran. Oil prices shot past $1 a barrel, and the Dangote Refinery, which buys its crude in naira under a government arrangement, started bleeding foreign exchange fast. The global shock hit the refinery directly. Nigeria couldn't afford a fuel crisis on top of everything else, so they let 6 new import licenses out the door. A senior person in the Dangote Refinery actually said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. I'm paraphrasing, but they literally said, look at what Trump is doing. He's fighting for American industry. The whole world is resisting him to protect their own. Why isn't Nigeria protecting ours? And there is one thing worth knowing. In 2024, Dangote actually sued the regulator over import permits being given to competitors. That lawsuit got withdrawn after his relationship with the government, quote, improved. Then, a few months later, the same regulator suspends everyone else import licenses. I want to ask you a question. Does protecting local industry become protecting one man's monopoly? Now, I want to give you both sides of this cleanly because you deserve to make up your own mind. Okay, so first, let's look at the case for import ban. That is, for those who want that we should ban all fuel imports into Nigeria. You see, no African mega refinery can survive if it's immediately thrown into competition with European refineries that were built decades ago and are fully paid off. In fact, you have to protect an infant industry before it competes with an adult. That's how industrial policy works. Germany did it. South Korea did it. China is doing it right now. Now, let's go to the case against. A monopoly without strong regulation is just dependency wearing different clothes. The extraction continues. The person at the top just switch passports. So both arguments are solid. I don't think either is really too wrong. The real question here is what kind of safeguards exist around Dangote's power? And right now, that answer isn't very, very clear. What I can tell you for certain, in February 2026, one African company supplied 92% of the fuel for Africa's most populous country. That has never happened before, not even once in Nigeria's history. And South Africa is already on the phone. Now, Bloomberg reported that Johannesburg officially reached out to Dangote as Middle East supply routes started breaking down. Dangote himself reportedly told The Economist, and I love this line, right now, it's not about pricing, it's about availability. Now, if this refinery works, really works, not just survive, it changes what African industry really believe is possible. It proves that an African-scale energy champion can be built by Africans with African capital. But if it fails or if it starts exploiting its position, we would have just rebuilt the same structure that held us back for 50 years, just with a familiar name on the front. Okay, shift to East Africa. Something happened in Arusha on March 7 that barely made the news, and it could be the most important economic story on the continent this year. 8 presidents, 1 room, 1 deadline. June 30th, 2026. Every known barrier inside the East African community gone. Nada. Let me explain. Non-tariff barrier. I know the name is designed to put you to sleep, but stay with me. You see, you bake bread in Nairobi. The border tax into Kigali is 0. Free trade, it's all open. So you load your truck. At the Ugandan crossing, the inspector there says your packaging doesn't meet a standard you have never heard of. Your health certificate is the wrong format. A certain envelope needs to cross the desk before anyone looks at your papers. So with all these hurdles, your bread spoils, you lose the contract, and you never try again. That's a non-tariff barrier. No law, just someone with a clipboard and a discretionary power. Now, the East African community, 300 million people, $300 billion in GDP, is on paper a common market. In reality, a Kenyan company often finds it cheaper to sell to Europe than to sell to its neighbor, Tanzania. Yeah, that's where we are. So remove those barriers, actually remove them, and the Ugandan farmer can sell into Kenyan processing hub 2 hours away instead of building his own plant. A logistic company in Dar es Salaam can serve the whole region because the road to Kigali no longer has 17 checkpoints bleeding money from every truck. Agriculture, manufacturing, services, the sectors that pull millions of young people to work, not in startup offices, the real economy. So why hasn't this started already? Because every barrier fits someone. That inspector, he answers to someone. That redundant permits process, someone designed it deliberately. And they have a cousin on the committee tasked with removing it. East African community leaders have made this promise before. Kenya and Uganda had the whole war over dairy. Uganda blocked Kenyan milk at the border, citing health concerns. The real concern was competition. But here is why 2026 actually feels different. The global trade system is cracking. Trump's tariff war, the Iran conflict choking off Strait of Hormuz shipping. Countries with internal markets will absorb those shocks. Countries without them will just get squeezed. This deadline is not a coincidence. And the African Continental Free Trade Area, covering 54 countries, is watching. If the East African community delivers, it becomes a proof of concept for the whole continent. Every other regional bloc gets put on notice. There is a proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. East Africa has been promising to go together for 30 years. June 30th is the next test. So, mark that date. Big one, and then I'll pull all stories together. February 28th, 2026, the United States launched military strikes on Iran. No congressional vote, executive decision, and Trump expected NATO allies to fall in line. That's how it's always worked. But they didn't. Italy, the US asked to use Naval Air Station Sigonella in Sicily. That has been the launchpad for virtually every American operation in the Middle East for over 60 years. Rome said, not for this one. Spain went further. Pedro Sanchez denied the Rota and Moron bases, then closed Spanish space entirely for any aircraft involved in the war. US planes based in the UK or France, just trying to fly through Spanish territory to reach the war zone, blocked. He called the campaign unjustified, dangerous, and outside international law. Then the UK Stammer made an official statement
that this is not our war, and we're not going to get dragged into it.
Then he even went further to say they pressured him.
Whatever the pressure on me and others, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest in all the decisions that I make.
5 words went viral. This is not our war. Trump's reaction? He didn't build a new coalition. He destroyed the existing one. Threatened again to pull America out of NATO. Told European allies to learn to fight for themselves because they weren't there when the US needed them. Worth noting, this war was never voted on by Congress. It was launched by an executive order, and Americans paying $5 a gallon because the Strait of Hormuz is a war corridor are getting restless. Meanwhile, China and Pakistan quietly put a peace framework, ceasefire, sovereignty, dialogue. But that's barely registered in Western media. In the global south, it positioned Beijing and Islamabad as the serious adults. African governments noticed. Now, here is why this lands back in Africa. Every crack in Western alliance unity creates negotiating space. African governments don't have to pick a side. They get to be courted. Space to tell Washington, we are also talking to Beijing. Space to tell Europe, better terms on that trade deal, please. Now, I want to make this clear. Fragmented Western alliances don't automatically equal to stronger Africa. It's more complicated than that. But the architecture that kept African states at the negotiating floor for decades has genuine cracks, more than at any point in living memory. And history is clear. The countries that read a power transition correctly don't just survive, they advance. So here is the threat. Nigeria, who controls the system that moves energy inside East Africa, who controls the system that moves goods across African borders. the world. Who controls the security system that's been running the global order since 1945? 3 different rooms, same argument. Africa has spent 60 years operating inside systems other people built, fuel systems designed to benefit foreign traders, border infrastructure inherited from colonial logic, security frameworks that said pick Washington or Moscow and stay there. This week, one African entrepreneur trying to build a new energy system, 8 presidents trying to rebuild a trade system, multiple Western leaders walking away from a security system they no longer trust. Systems change slowly and then all at once, and the most consequential decisions happening right now are not in walls. They are in a pipeline approval in Abuja, a border procedure manual in Arusha, a prime minister's office at 2 a.m. deciding. Not this time. Power doesn't announce itself, it moves through a license, a deadline nobody is covering, a base denial that shakes 60 years of assumptions. Africa is not waiting for permission to build. What this moment is calling for is Africans who understand that whoever controls the system controls the outcome, and who start building now. Drop your take in the comments. Is the East African Community deadline real this time, or political theater? Does NATO fracturing actually help Africa? I want to know what you think. If this episode shifted, share it with one person who needs to see it. We are currently at about 470,000 subscribers. We want to reach 500,000 subscribers very soon. So please, those of you who have not subscribed, do subscribe. I don't know what you're waiting for. See you in my next video. Bye.